Hello everyone, so I'm back with another video, and in today's video we are going to understand why we use interfaces and how to define an interface in TypeScript for objects. So with that in mind, let's start off with the video for the day. So let's just say we have an object called as mobile, and it has some variables like the processor of the mobile, like which is quad core, RAM which is 8 GB, and we are printing the summary, that is the processor is, or we can say we are printing the config. So config as processor is this dot processor, and let's just say RAM is this dot RAM, something like this. Now if we want to create a function here, for example, let's just say const print config, and in this config function we want to print out, or we pass the mobile variable as such, and we want to print out the actual config like console.log processor is. So we will go with the backtick notation, and let's just say mobile.processor. And then there is another console.log which prints out the RAM. So RAM is mobile.ram. Now, if you want to make this TypeScript compatible, so what we need to do is we need to make sure that this mobile, which is present here, needs to be in a proper format. So for that, what we need to do is we need to add another colon here, which specifies the type. Then within that type, we need to specify the processor and RAM. So we'll go with processor first. So processor, which is a string, comma, the RAM, which is another string. And let's just remove this. Okay, so this is how we actually write the type annotation for this mobile phone. But as you can see, the overall length of the function is already long, and we also need to have the return type. So we'll have to go with void in front of it, which is the return type of the function. So this makes this function a little bit longer. So in order to avoid this problem, what we can do is we can use something called as interfaces. So what we do is we write interface for the mobile phone. So let's just say interface device, which is a generic device term. Then we write processor, so which will be string. And here we will use semicolon. So here also I think we should have semicolon instead of the comma. And then we have the RAM, which is a string. And we use this interface instead of this long form variable. So we write here device. So this shortens the function a little bit, and then we call the print config, and let's just save this works. So we go into the annotations folder and we run ts node interfaces do.ts. Actual call here, and I think this should fix the issue. So we run ts node interfaces too, and as you can see, we have processor is quad core and RAM is 8 GB. Now let's just say instead of printing out this RAM and processor here, what we do is we have a config method in the mobile phone like this, and we want to call this config method instead of this longer form of string. So what we can do is instead of calling this both, we can simply call mobile.config. Now as soon as we do it, we get an error. The reason for this is because in the interface called as device, we haven't defined the config function. So what we can do is we can write config here, like so, with the return type void, and hit save. Now the error has gone away, and now if we run ts node interface 2, we should get the same output. So we have the config defined properly. Now let's just say we have another variable here called as computer, and computer has some other properties like, let's just say processor again, octa-core. There is no RAM, let's just say, and we write a config for here as well with a return type void, and we go with console.log processor this dot processor. And now we want to like use the same print config method to write the computer as well. So in this case, so we pass the print config and we pass the computer object to this print config function, and as you can see we have an error. The reason why there is an error is because we have defined processor and RAM in this interface, but it does not find the RAM in the computer object. So what you can do is, if you want to, let's just say, extend this interface to be used in both of the cases. So what we can do is we can remove the processor and RAM, and we can just keep the config, and by this the error goes away. Now this is no longer a mobile, so we can go with, let's just say, device, and we write device.config here, and we save it and we run it again. Now as you can see, we have the mobile configuration and then the computer configuration printed out. So this is one of the ways in which you can like use a common interface across different objects. So the reason why this works is because when TypeScript compiles the interface, it only checks whether the this kind of property is present in the object or not. It does not check for additional properties. The advantage of this is, even though, let's just say, in your server request or response, if you have multiple properties, but you want to focus on certain properties in your code, then you can focus on only those properties and write those properties in your interface, and all the other properties will get ignored or they will not be checked by TypeScript. So the config function which is defined in interface device, that only will get checked in the object, and that only the return type of that function will be checked. So instead of void, if we write something like integer here, then we'll get an error because config has void as uh, the return of the function. So this is how you can use interfaces to extend the functionality, or we can type check the object in our code, and we can write interfaces to like reduce the length of the code like so, and we can like use it to build various functionalities in our code. I hope this was clear to you. So this is how we use interfaces to define the various properties for a particular object and use them in our code for type checking. So that's it from my end for today. Thank you and have a nice day. Goodbye.